Antithesis may be defined as the juxtaposition of opposing or contrasting ideas. Antithesis is a figure of speech which refers to putting together or the juxtaposition of opposing or contrasting ideas. Antithesis involves the bringing out of a contrast in the ideas by an obvious contrast in words, clauses, or sentences within a parallel grammatical structure. Means two opposite ideas or words or clauses or sentences are put into a grammatical structure in order to create a startling effect. This combination of a balanced structure with opposite ideas serves to highlight the contrast between them. It makes the narrative more striking through balance and emphasis of the words. The use of antithesis is very popular in speeches and in common day-to-day speeches. Even it is very common in literature. The obvious contrast often makes antithesis quite memorable, and at the same time it strengthens the argument of a sentence. Let us see some examples of antithesis from our day-to-day life, from some famous speeches. For example, we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools, said by Martin Luther King Jr. Here we have an antithesis which is balanced with two opposite ideas: to live and or to perish. Another popular example is man proposes, God disposes. Another example is speech is silver but silence is gold. A very famous example from an ancient writer, Goethe, is love is an ideal thing, marriage a real thing. So a contrast between ideal and real is balanced here. A very popular quotation by Neil Armstrong, an astronaut, is that is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So contrast between small and giant, which is balanced in order to convey a strong idea. In literature, writers employ antithesis not only in their sentences, but they use antithesis in characters and also in the events. In this way, the use of antithesis is extensive in literature. Let us now discuss some of the famous examples of antithesis in literature. The opening lines of Charles Dickens' novel, A Tale of Two Cities, provides an unforgettable antithesis example. Charles Dickens is a very famous and very important novelist of the Victorian age. He writes about his age and says, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way." So in these lines, the contrasting ideas set in a parallel structures, and they markedly highlight the conflict that existed in the time, the Victorian age, discussed in the novel. In William Shakespeare's, there is another very famous example where antithesis is used in some different way. In William Shakespeare's famous play Julius Caesar, we notice antithesis in the characters of Mark Antony and Marcus Brutus. In this play, Brutus is portrayed as the noblest of Romans who is close to Caesar, and a person, Brutus is a person who loved Rome and loved Caesar. Antony, on the contrary, is shown as a man with the evil intentions of harming or giving trouble to Caesar and taking charge of Rome. These antithetical characters in this play highlight the conflict in this play. In drama, antithesis can also be helpful tool for an author, both to show a character's mindset and to set up an argument. If the antithesis is something that the character is thinking, the audience can better understand the full scope of the character's thoughts. Means a character's mindset can be better revealed by the application of antithesis. While antithesis is not very common literary devices with all the authors, but some authors have used antithesis extensively in their plays or in their works, such as the writers like William Shakespeare. Many of his Shakespeare's sonnets and Shakespeare's plays include examples of antithesis. William Shakespeare's famous play Hamlet has a very famous soliloquy by its protagonist. In one of his soliloquy, Hamlet says, "To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them." Arguably, the most famous 6 words, to be or not to be, in all of Shakespeare's works are the example of antithesis. In these lines, in his soliloquy, the protagonist Hamlet considers the most important question: to be or not to be, whether to survive or to kill himself. In this particular line, Hamlet is considering the very nature of the existence itself, the nature of life itself. Though the line is very simple in its form, but it contrasts a very important idea. Hamlet sets up his soliloquy with this antithesis and continues with many other antitheses in the same speech, including the contrast between suffering, whatever fortune has to offer, or he should proceed to oppose bravely all the troubles. This is a very good example of Shakespeare using antithesis to present the audience or the readers Hamlet's inner life and Hamlet's range of thinking. There are many famous examples in the following literature. For example, Alexander Pope, in his famous work, An Essay on Criticism, says, "To err is human, to forgive divine," means making mistakes, fallibility, is the basic trait of humans, and God, the Creator, is always forgiving. Through these antithetical ideas, Pope attempts to reveal the basic nature of human beings. He wants to convey to his readers that God is forgiving because his creation, human beings, are erring. Another famous example is observed in John Milton's Paradise Lost. In one of the speeches made by the central character Satan is, "Better to reign in hell than serve heaven." In this famous epic work, Paradise Lost, the contrasting ideas of reign means to rule and serve, which are opposite ideas, and hell with heaven are placed in this same sentence to achieve an antithetical effect. Let us now discuss the purpose or the function of antithesis in literature. A literary device like antithesis uses words to convey ideas in a unique way, in a different way from the common words and common expressions of daily life. In this way, antithesis conveys meaning more vividly than an ordinary speech. When contrasting ideas are brought in this way together, the idea is expressed more emphatically, more forcefully. As a literary device, antithesis makes contrasts in order to examine pros and cons of a subject which is under discussion and helps to bring forth judgment on that particular subject. So this is all about antithesis in literature.